Hey guys, how's it going? Today I wanted to speak about the subject of, can artificial intelligence be creative? Well, it all depends on how you look at artificial intelligence. Are we artificial intelligence? Well, let's think about it this way. If you're going to build a computer, well, you have to have a motherboard, a CPU, you have a power supply, some RAM, and a hard drive. Hard drive being what people mostly know as where you store your memory, where you store your knowledge in some way. The CPU is kind of like the heart of the computer, where it pumps a bunch of information at different speeds, and the RAM is like the highway of the computer itself. And in some way, the motherboard, to me at least, it's kind of like the body of the computer. Well, I guess that would be the case, but the internal body, which be the vessels, the blood vessels, the white cells, all that good stuff. And if you really think about it, even though it doesn't really have its own free will, it manages to do some really creative stuff in its own way, as long as you program it to do so. And if you really think about ourselves as machines, we do have a brain, and the brain has the whole nervous system, kind of like the motherboard, and we have a heart, just like the CPU, and there's a lot of data that is stored in our brain, such as the hard drive in a computer. The only thing that we have that is very different is that we are made out of cells and not out of computer components. We're not man-made, although we kind of are, because we come from sperm and we come from also evolution and all that stuff. But can artificial intelligence be creative? I think if it is set in such a way where you think of it this way: we took millions and millions of years really to evolve to what we have right now, to being ourselves. So through the evolution of computers, why wouldn't we be able to break the code of artificial intelligence and make it in such a way that they can learn just like us? It's already happening, where, I don't know if you've seen, but there's that robot that looks kind of like us. It's a woman, and she's able to crack jokes, she's able to have conversations with you, she's able to understand what you're saying, and it's almost human-like in some way. And she's also learning. She will remember things that you tell her. She will be able to look up stuff that she doesn't know, although she does know a lot. But she is connected to the internet in some way, because they have a big server and they have a lot of stuff that is set in her capabilities of knowledge. But you got to think of it this way: is now we're just in the infancy of all that stuff. Not even 100 years ago, there were no computers, or at least computers in the way that we think of them. Maybe in the 1950s or 60s, we kind of had the first start of a computer, and look at how much it has evolved in barely 50 years. So think of it this way: if we've gone from pretty much just little lines of text to super computerized graphics in movies and video games and virtual reality semi-worlds that you can actually go to, then who are we to say that in maybe 50 years or 100 years we will get to a point where we will actually be able to program so much, have so much data set in that computer, and it can access it at such a fast pace that eventually we would actually be able to make it learn at the same speed as us, and maybe at some point would actually be maybe learning at a faster pace than us. And on top of that, now with nanotechnology and all that stuff, they're already doing it. What if you were basically combining our biological elements, the things that we have in our body, and they're combining it with robotic parts? So there's one thing that you want to think of. If we already are putting computerized parts in our body, then are computers human? But what if we start out with a computer which is mostly computerized and we put a bit of organic stuff in it? Then does that become human? If it's alive, if it's pumping a heart, how can you tell the difference between what is human, what is not human? And also, they are definitely making creative choices even now. They're basically they have this whole thing where they're testing out artificial intelligence and how they would come up with scripts. So they're having basically robotic artificial intelligence writing the next movie, the next blockbuster, and seeing what's happening with that. Well, I do feel that intrinsically we are very similar as human beings. We all have the want to nourish ourselves. This means eat, breathe, we go to the toilet, we live, we are born, and we die. And because we have such similarities, even between humans and, I feel, animals and even trees and flowers and everything pretty much on this earth, there's a sort of similarity and a sort of bond. And at the same time, if you're able to teach that to a robotic intelligence, then you can definitely create something that is creative. And already think about it this way. If you play a video game, such as, for example, XCOM. XCOM is a video game that is based on fighting UFOs and aliens and creatures, kind of like in the X-Files. And in that video game, you have computer-generated levels. And for people who are not really gamers and stuff like that, you can just look at old games such as Worms. They also had computer-generated games and levels. That's what I mean. So if you look at it that way, well, what is happening there? Well, we are setting different patterns for the computer to do, and it manages to basically randomly create levels out of the formula that we gave to it. So by letting it do that, well, it is kind of being creative. Maybe it's not too difficult, maybe it's not too crazy, but it is being creative in its own way, even with whatever parameters it's given. But the more and more parameters you give it, and the more intelligence you give it in some way, then it's able to actually maybe even continue the algorithm that you gave it, and maybe even surpass whatever you had expected that it would get. And it's kind of weird when I'm talking about it this way, because I'm not putting formulas and stuff to it, but computers are already being creative in its own way. It's just being set to certain rules. So we have certain rules ourselves as human beings. So if we are able to basically give enough rules to the computer, then it might actually be able to be even more creative than us, because we can give it basically much bigger intelligence than we could ever have. But that's going to be in the future and not exactly now. So now it's fantasy, but very soon I think we will have computers that will be much more creative, much more intelligent than human beings, and they might even be able to come up with ideas and formulas and things that we would never even have imagined, just because they're able to do all these calculations and stuff like that. Okay, that's it. That's all I have to say on the subject. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.